Hey, it's me, Nalthazar, and welcome to another Magic the Gathering Puzzle Quest video. In today's video, I'm going to be going over the uncommons that caught my eye from the Strixhaven set spoilers. So, let's get into it. I wound up making this its own separate video, meaning just the uncommons, which means that the commons will have their own separate video also. And the reason for that is just that there were so many commons and uncommons that caught my eye from this set that will be really useful cards, that I felt that they deserved their own videos, which is kind of surprising. It just means that there are so many cards in this set that you're going to want to keep your eyes out for, that I need to make 5 separate videos to cover the different cards in this set. So that's a good thing. Lots of stuff to chase. I'm excited. Now, the first of the uncommons is going to be Closing Statement. You're going to see a trend with a lot of the uncommons in that it's going to pack a lot of removal. So this set is very heavy in power cards in the rare through masterpiece range. And like with most sets, a lot of the removal is going to be in the common uncommon range. So here in this video, you're going to see a lot of removal in this uncommon range. Now, Closing Statement is a 13 mana spell. It has flash. One of the important features of this is that it is both white and black. When a creature dies, if this card is in your hand, it gains 2 mana, and then you destroy an opposing Vanguard support. If you can't, then you destroy the first opposing creature. Then your first creature gets a permanent +2/+2 buff. So this can remove Vanguards, especially if you get matched up against, say, the Tibalt Planeswalker. It can destroy your first opposing creature, and it has no limitations on that creature destruction, so it doesn't matter if it's a token or anything about mana cost or hexproof or ward. It'll bypass all of that, destroy the first opposing creature, and then you're going to buff your first creature. So you get quite a lot of value out of this card, and on top of all the value that you're getting out of it, it's dual color, which means that you can throw this in a white deck. Now, would I likely throw this in a black deck? No, probably not, because there's much better black removal at our disposal that costs less mana. But the key feature here is that you can throw this in a white deck, and so this just starts to expand the pool of planeswalkers that we can use and get a lot of value out of, because now we're going to start having removal in colors other than black. So this is a very good card. Next up is Daemogoth Woe-Eater. I'm assuming that this is pronounced Daemogoth because AE usually is pronounced E, although they're not together with the little italices, but oh well. Daemogoth Woe-Eater is a 9 mana, 8/7 Vigilant Demon. It is both green and black, and at the beginning of your turn, destroy a support you control that has a creature subtype. If you can't, destroy the last creature you control. Then, when this creature dies, your opponent discards a card, you draw a card, and you gain 4 life. Now, before I unpack this card has almost a mythic level of power. I would say that this card is better than a lot of rares or mythics from some of the recent sets that have come out. So I'm really excited about this card, and I think this is a fantastic pull at the uncommon range. So, firstly, 9 mana for an 8/7 with Vigilance is crazy good. That is an incredible amount of value, and that's something that any player is going to be able to play. So you don't have to worry if you've been able to level up your Planeswalkers or not. You're going to be able to throw this into a deck and start whapping on people. Next up, at the beginning of your turn, destroy a support that has a creature subtype, or if you can't, destroy the last creature you control. So this thing has Vigilance, so it's likely going to be in your first creature slot, which means it's going to be steadily destroying all the other creatures you control before it destroys itself. Now, this is important because there are a lot of objectives in this game that require us to destroy X or more creatures, or lose X or more creatures. And this is going to enable you to achieve that particular objective very easily, especially if you have cards that are going to be able to make tokens every single turn. If you, for example, have a white-black or a white-green planeswalker at your disposal, then you could use this along with Murder Investigation, which is a support that either comes with Origins Gideon or it comes in one of the packs that you earn from the first sort of chapter of stories. But that card makes it so that whenever a creature you control dies, you put a 1/1 token on the battlefield. And so that, in conjunction with this, will make it so that this will likely just destroy that token every single turn, and then it'll just replace itself with another token, and now you've basically got yourself a 9 mana, 8/7 Vigilant, which is absolutely phenomenal. And if that wasn't alone, like the only piece of this card, when this creature dies, your opponent discards a card, you draw a card, and you gain 4 life. And green and black are both colors that don't tend to have a whole lot of card draw. So your opponent discarding a card, you drawing a card, and gaining life for 9 mana is already a solid ability. And even if you just played this thing and it came out and blocked a creature your opponent controlled, and then killed that creature, it made it back to your turn, this thing then attacks and then dies at the end of your turn, I mean, that would be enough value for me to make it so that I would be really happy with this card anyways. So Daemogoth Woe-Eater is definitely a card I'm going to be keeping my eyes out on as I'm opening my packs, and hopefully I get it earlier on in the set cycle rather than later so that I can make a video on it, because I think this is a really good card. Next up is Deadly Brew. Deadly Brew is a 6 mana spell. It is both green and black and has destroy the last creature each player controls. If they can't, destroy a Vanguard support that player controls. Then, return the first non-creature, non-Vanguard support from your graveyard to your hand. So, this is really just another way for newer players to be able to achieve destroy objectives. And then also it provides newer players with just another removal card that they can throw in their Nissa decks that will enable them to be able to destroy opposing creatures with mechanics other than fight. So it's just going to give you, if you're a newer player, a lot more flexibility in your deck building, because it's going to give you access to removal, which is fairly scarce in green on the whole. So I will not personally be using this card very much, but I can see this card getting a heck of a lot of use for players that have smaller collections. And I'm not saying this in a like, oh, I am superior way. Just I think this is a phenomenal card for newer players. As you wind up opening Strixhaven packs and you get this card, this will enable you to have much more successful decks with your starter Planeswalker. So I really like that cards like this exist. And even for people with, a little bit more established collections, maybe some of you free-to-play players, this will still be a pretty good card for you too, because it's going to destroy the last creature that each player controls at only 6 mana. So if you're leveling up your Planeswalkers, if you make a match in your colors, this is guaranteed to be fully charged from just one match, and it's going to destroy 2 creatures, which is going to be phenomenal for creature destruction objectives. And you can use it to slow yourself down if you need. You can use it to just wipe out stuff that your opponent controls. The thing that I'm most curious to know about this, really, though, is if it has a confirm cancel prompt, because otherwise this will be a little bit dangerous to play with, especially if you're running green and you're running some gem conversion. And then the other piece is if you actually need to have a creature yourself. If this works without you having a creature down, then this card actually is going to become a lot better. So there's a lot to test out with it. When I get it, I will certainly test that out to see if that is the case. But nonetheless, this is a card that you are going to want to look out for as you're opening your packs. Next up is going to be Divide by Zero. So this is a 9 mana spell. It's mono blue. It has Flash and Learn, meaning that when you cast this, you're going to get, my guess, is either the common or the uncommon from this particular school. So this will either be from the green-blue school or from the red-blue school. I am inclined to think green-blue just by the art, but I don't know. If your opponent has 5 or less cards in their hand, return an opposing non-token support with base cost 6 or more to your opponent's hand. If they can't, return the first non-token creature with base cost 7 or more to your opponent's hand. Then you learn. So what I like about this card is actually a few things. The first is that it provides blue with a form of support removal, in that it's going to be bouncing an opposing non-token support. The second thing I like is that it specifies non-token, meaning that you will be able to bounce lands. There is very little in the game right now that's able to bounce or destroy lands. This will be able to do that. So what's nice is that in bouncing those non-token supports, you're getting rid of some things that other colors really struggle to get rid of on their own, right? I mean, getting rid of lands, we don't have a lot of that. So this will get rid of those. If your opponent has some kind of particularly nasty support, like Starfield of Nyx, it's going to get rid of that. This also is going to be able to get rid of that new blue enchantment if you have this thing charged up in your hand ahead of time that makes it so you can't cast spells. So there's definitely a lot of practical uses for this just to get rid of supports. But if that's not the only thing it does, it also is going to be bouncing the first non-token creature that your opponent controls. Now it specifies with base cost 7 or more, but let's face it, you pretty much never see anything that has a base cost of less than 7 or less than 8 if you're outside of, I'm going to go ahead and say bronze. I mean, maybe in silver you'll see a few of them, but by the time you get to gold, you're not really going to see very many things that cost 7 or less. There just aren't a lot of creatures in that range, so this will most likely be able to bounce pretty much anything that you go up against. So this is a phenomenal card. You definitely want to keep an eye on it, and I could see people all the way from bronze through platinum getting use out of this card. Next up is Fracture. Fracture is 6 mana. It is white and black and has flash, and destroy the opposing non-land support with the highest shield. This effect can affect vanguards. So this is just going to be an absolutely fantastic card. I think that this is a card that pretty much everyone is going to want to wind up throwing in their decks. It's only 6 mana, so everyone's going to be able to cast it pretty easily, regardless of Planeswalker level. It is white and black, so it gives black additional access to support removal. But hey, white, you get another really good support removal card. And it destroys the non-land opposing non-land support with the highest shield. So this gives us a way of kind of picking the support in a way. We don't get to select the support, but nonetheless, we know that it's going to destroy the support with the highest shields. So this will be really good, especially with fractals coming in this set, as fractals are going to potentially be very powerful. They're going to have very high shield counts, and they're going to be buffing your opponent's creatures in ways that will make you lose games pretty quickly. So this is a card that is an uncommon, and it's playable in 2 colors, and has a very low mana cost that will enable you to combat that kind of thing. So I see this as being a very good card to have in your collection. It gets rid of a lot of the bigger threats that you're going to be able to encounter in Standard right now. So this is a very good card to have. Next up is going to be Grinning Ignus. Grinning Ignus is an 8 mana 3/3 with haste, which might make you be like, what? That's not very powerful. But wait, there's more. At the end of your turn, you may return this creature to your hand. If you do, destroy 9 non-red gems. So, oof, that ability on the bottom makes this a super cool card. Like, this card with Koth is going to be phenomenal. It's basically like you get to use your first ability for free again every single turn, because you just bounce this thing back to your hand and destroy 9 non-red gems, and then gain oodles of mana because of Koth's red mana bonus. Now, if you're playing with pretty much any other Planeswalker, this is where this card has a lot of extra potential value also. So if destroying gems also counts as triggering enhancements, then this will be a phenomenal card to throw in an enhancement deck, because at 8 mana, you're going to be able to play this thing fairly easily, probably every turn to every other turn, and then it's going to go ahead and start popping a bunch of enhancement gems. And as doing that, it's going to make it so that you're going to get a lot more value out of your enhancement cards, assuming that it works that way. If it doesn't, and you're running a deck instead that runs activated gems, then nonetheless, this is going to be a great card to throw in with activated gems. Nonetheless, this is a card that's going to be able to provide you with a bunch of mana, a bunch of loyalty from all the cascades by destroying the non-red gems, and is just a really solid card all around. It's going to come in, it's going to attack, and then it's going to get its ability. And so you get a lot of value out of this for just an uncommon. So I do quite like this card. The last thing that I really like about this card, before I move on to the next one, is that this is an elemental that is going to return to your hand and then just be able to be recastable. So if we have any objectives that require us to play an elemental, or cast some number of elementals, or play some number of elementals, either way, you can just keep returning this to your hand every turn and then replaying it for that cast objective, on top of getting all the other benefits that this card provides. So this is actually a very, very cool card. I really like how they designed this one, and I'm really excited to play with it. Next up is Maelstrom Muse. Maelstrom Muse is a 10 mana 3/5 flyer. It is both blue and red, and it has, when this creature attacks, the first spell card in your hand gains X mana. X is this creature's power. So there's a few things that make this card really good. The first is that it gains mana based on the creature's power, not its base power. So it's guaranteed going to be getting, well, not guaranteed, but it's almost guaranteed going to be giving at least 3 mana per turn when it attacks. But then if you're playing any kind of spell that's going to be able to buff this, or if you're playing with a planeswalker that's able to buff this, or you're playing with other creatures that are going to find a way to buff this, then you're going to make it so that you're going to be getting a whole bunch of mana to the spells in your hand. At only 10 mana, this is a very reasonable cost to be played in pretty much any player's deck, and we have a lot of objectives that come around that require us to play X or more spells. And so this is going to just be a card that's going to add a lot of flexibility to your decks, and is going to be a very powerful card in those decks. So I actually really like Maelstrom Muse. It's a card that I could see people using all the way up through Platinum, just because it has a lot of functionality. Just being able to give that mana to that first spell card in your hand is going to be really powerful. Now, this is not like the end-all be-all, like you must use this card, but nonetheless, it's still very powerful, and at an uncommon, that's a phenomenal pickup. So definitely one that you're going to want to keep your eyes out for as you're pulling your packs. Next up is Mentor's Guidance. This is an 8 mana spell. Draw 2 cards and then give each of those cards 4 mana. Then, when you cast this card, if you control a Cleric, Druid, Shaman, Warlock, Wizard, or Vanguard, and the spell is not a copy, meaning that you cast this card, and then when you cast it, if you have one of those creature types, you then copy this card. That copy gains full mana, and then you're going to draw 2 more cards and give each of those 4 mana. So really, if you have a Cleric, Druid, Shaman, Warlock, Wizard, or Vanguard on the board, then this becomes an 8 mana, draw 4 cards, give each of those cards 4 mana, which is like just ridiculous value. I mean, this is another card that I see getting use all the way through Platinum, because at 8 mana, very reasonable mana cost, draw 4 cards and give each of them 4 mana, super good. I mean, even if you look at a card like Talent of the Telepath, which is a 5 mana, fetch one of the first 4 cards from your library and give it 6 mana, I mean, I see that card being used all the time, and this thing gives us 4 cards and gives them 4 mana, which isn't quite 6, but nonetheless is giving you a whole bunch of mana and a whole bunch of cards. This is going to be great for newer players. It's going to be great for people with full collections. So this is just a really good card all around. I think it's going to get a lot of use and is definitely a card that you're going to want to have in your collection. Next up is Poet's Quill. This is maybe the coolest of the uncommons that they made in this set. I love this card. So this is 10 mana. It's got 3 shields. It has the new equipment feature for whenever a creature you control attacks, this card gains 2 mana. So it's going to be really easy for this thing to get full mana. And it also has Learn. So when this support enters the board, you learn. You're going to get a common or an uncommon Learn card, is my guess how Learn is working. So you get to pick between those 2 when you play this. I'm going to go ahead and say this is going to probably be from the white-black, the silver quill school. It could be green-black, but I'm thinking this looks more like a white-black type of card. And then while on the board, your first creature gets +2/+2 and gains lifelink. So this is kind of like a poor person's Shadow Spear, because it's giving your first creature a boost and lifelink and has 3 shields. It doesn't get rid of hexproof, it doesn't get rid of prevent damage, and it gives +2/+2 instead of +3/+3. But it costs the same amount of mana. However, it's going to be easier to cast because it's going to gain mana when your creatures attack, and depending on what the Learn cards are that you can get from it, it could potentially provide you with even more utility. So I love this card. I think this is a card that's going to get a lot of use from a lot of players. Like, it doesn't matter what bracket you're in, right? Bronze, Platinum, this is going to be just such a strong card. This is one that is actually like a chase card. When you get this card, you can do like a little jig, a little dance, because you're going to get a lot of value out of this card. I see you getting a lot of value out of this card, actually. Very, very good. Next up is going to be the Quandrix Cultivator. This is 11 for a 4/5. It is a turtle druid. Spoiler alert, turtles are actually my favorite animals. So this thing being a turtle druid is really cool because I love turtles. Granted, my favorite magic creature subtype is probably goblins, maybe angels. It's tough to say, but like in real animals, turtles, for sure, turtles. Yes. So 11 for a 4/5, and when this creature enters the battlefield, fetch the first land support from your library, give it 6 mana. If you can't, convert 5 gems to blue or green. So Basically, if there's something that makes it so you can't fetch, or you just don't have lands in your library, then when this creature enters the battlefield, convert 5 gems to blue or green. But if you are playing lands in your library, and I would strongly advise that you do in almost any deck, not any deck, but almost any deck, then this thing is going to be able to fetch lands from your library and give them mana. So this is going to make it really easy for land objectives. This is going to make it really easy for you to get a bunch of mana ramp in your decks if you're a newer player. And if you wind up having some of the more, sought after cards like Thassa that let you flicker the thing every turn, then you could flicker this thing every turn to fetch lands from your library, or just flicker it every time to convert gems. So this is an absolutely phenomenal card at the uncommon range. It's one that I really see is more for newer players than people who have bigger collections, just because there are going to be things that do this thing's job a little bit better. I'm looking at Urza as an example, as a thing that's going to do this thing's job a little bit better. But other than Urza, or Avatar of Growth, right? Avatar of Growth will actually do this thing's job a little better, but those are masterpieces. So those aren't cards that everyone has, and I recognize that. So this is a card that you can potentially get a lot of value out of. Next up is Reflective Golem. This is 9 mana for a 3/4. When you cast a non-copy spell, if the only target of that spell is this creature, you may drain 8 mana from your hand. If you do, create a copy of that spell in your hand and give it full mana. I see this as being a really fun card to use with auras, especially if you wind up using something like, I want to say it's Colossification, right? Or is it Giganto? It's not Gigantiform. I think it's Colossification. It's where you boost this thing up to, you boost it by 20/20. So if the boost does not actually make it so that it gets disabled and then doesn't do this, then this will be a really cool pairing for it, and it's something that I really want to try. This isn't one of the more powerful uncommons from the set, but I love the idea of how much gimmicky goodness you can get out of it. Next up on our list is Secret Rendezvous. Secret Rendezvous is a 7 mana spell. It is white, and each player draws 3 cards. Cards you've drawn this way gain 4 mana. Oof! This is kind of like a Day's Undoing in white, in a way. Like, I know that it doesn't make you guys shuffle your hands and stuff back into your library, but nonetheless, it's going to make both players draw cards, and then you get mana for the cards that you draw. I feel like this is probably going to be a staple in a lot of white decks that don't have blue in them, just because this is going to give white access to card draw. I feel like this almost alone is going to enable a lot more value out of mono white planeswalkers, just because it's going to give you access to very cheap card draw and giving mana to the cards that you draw. So this is going to make it so that you can actually draw and play more of those cards that you want to play with. This is going to be one of the top cards for me as a card that I'm looking for from the uncommon range, because this type of card is something that white desperately needs. And so I think that this is going to have a lot of value. Yes, I know that you're giving your opponent cards too. No, I wouldn't use it in a Timeless Voyage on the bottom node where my opponent is getting 2 swaps to my 1. But outside of that node, I see myself using this card a lot. It's very good. Giving your opponents cards, but you get them with more mana, is definitely a better proposition. So I love this card. Next up is Venerable Warsinger. This is 10 mana for a 4/4 with Berserker and Vigilance, and when this creature deals combat damage to your opponent's planeswalker, return the first creature card with base mana cost X or less from your graveyard to the battlefield, where X is 2 times the damage dealt to your opponent. So, I mean, this card's super cool. It's going to have a lot of value in a lot of decks. So, it's going to be hitting your opponent likely for 4, which is going to give you a creature with a base mana cost of 8 directly back to the battlefield. If this thing gets buffed at all, it's going to be bringing things back that are higher, and it's multiplicatively higher because it's going to be ×2. So, if you pair this in a white-green or a red-green deck with Gather the Pack, then especially for you newer players, you're going to be able to have a heck of a lot of fun with this card. So I see this as being a really strong pauper card, because if you pair this with, say, as I say, Gather the Pack, and you're running, say, I don't know, Volcanic Rambler in the deck, Volcanic Rambler is a 8 mana card. And so you're going to be probably just bringing back Volcanic Ramblers. And then because this thing has, when it deals combat damage to your opponent's planeswalker, if you give it double strike, then it's going to be bringing even more things back. And so if you pair it with, say, Samut, right, the Planeswalker Samut, in the event that you haven't used her in a while, then this Samut's first ability at max level is going to give it +2/+2 and double strike. So now it's going to be hitting for 6, which is going to bring back something that's 12 or less, and it's going to be bringing it back twice. So you're going to get a lot of value out of this card. It's a very cool card. It's one that I really want to test out and see if I can sort of, like break from a Pauper standpoint. But it's a card that I'm very excited to play with because it just has a really cool ability. And I mean, I could even see myself using this with some of the mythics, right? Like, I mean, maybe in some kind of discard engine deck or, whatever it may be. This card definitely looks really cool. The last card on my list is Zimone, Quandrix Prodigy, or Zimone, maybe Zimone. It's 6 mana for a 2/3. At the beginning of your turn, the first land support in your hand gains full mana, and if you can't, convert 3 gems to your Planeswalker colors. And when you activate a loyalty ability, draw a card. And if you control a support with 8 or more shields, you draw 2 cards instead. What I really like about this card is that even though it is only a 2/3, I feel like the ability on this card is really nice for players that are in the bronze and silver range. So I'm excluding gold and platinum because having a 6 mana creature, so something that's going to take up a creature slot to convert 3 gems to your Planeswalker colors, or otherwise giving lands in your hand full mana, isn't going to be quite as useful because you're probably going to have leveled up your Planeswalkers a little bit more. But nonetheless, at 6 mana, this makes it so that people in the lower tiers who haven't leveled up their Planeswalkers are going to have better access to gem conversion and ways to give their lands full mana. One of the things that can really hold back the usage of gem converters for newer players is the mana cost of those cards, and it can sometimes be difficult to justify using a gem converter that costs 10 or 12 mana if you don't have very high mana bonuses, and it's going to take you many turns to get that thing out on the battlefield. So I see this as being a fantastic enabler card for newer players, and so I really like the existence of it. Furthermore, it makes it so that when you activate your loyalty abilities, you're going to be drawing more cards, and so just between giving more mana and more cards, I think that it's going to enable newer players to do more, and the more that you're able to do, the more fun you're going to have playing the game. So I just see this as a really good card to make it so that the game is more fun for newer players. So that's my thoughts on this one. Those are the cards that I really caught my eye from the uncommon range from Strixhaven. There are a lot of them, I know. If I missed any that you had your eye on, go ahead and let me know in the comment section. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one.